Thank you so much. Just checking, you can hear me? Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thanks again to Ariane for putting this panel together, which I think has been a great idea. I'm going to look today at, I guess, the topic of AI and inclusion from a linguistics and communicative point of view. So my background, maybe just to explain a little bit, is in linguistics. And I've been doing a lot of work on looking at the use of language on social media platforms and in other AI-powered communication technologies. I've looked mainly at things like hate speech and disinformation and algorithmic bias. So this is what I will be talking about today. And also, maybe just to note, I've rephrased the title a little bit to say inclusive discourse strategies on Twitter, because I realize social networking platforms are all very different. And I'm also using Twitter, not X, because the data that I will be talking about is from a time when it was still Twitter. So before Elon Musk acquired the company. Just a quick outline what I will be talking about today. So I'll be starting with saying a few words about hate speech and harmful language, because this is basically what kind of brought me to this topic. And I believe that on a social media platform such as Twitter, harmful language is one of the biggest obstacles that really hinder inclusive communication. So I'll be talking about a little bit about hate speech research and also specifically hate speech research in the context of disability, the effects that this can have on people, and some of the mitigation strategies that are being used or have been used so far. Then I'm going to move on to counter speech and counter narratives. So this is basically what I'm mainly interested in this research is looking at how do people respond to harmful language, but also how do people independently create counter spaces and counter narratives to foster inclusive communication. And then I'll look at some of the examples that I found in the data set before I will conclude and point out some future work. So most of you, I'm assuming, have heard about hate speech and the problem of hate speech on social media. I've just included a recent definition here from Meta about what hate speech, according to their guidelines, is. I realize it tends to differ a little bit, but it's basically a direct attack against people based on protected characteristics, one of which can be disability or severe disease, chronic disease. So this is just the definition that I'm working with when I say hate speech. So yeah, as I said before, I think one of the biggest obstacles really for inclusive communication, and also one of the biggest problems that disabled people and people of other marginalized groups are facing on social media is abusive language. So just to include some statistics, according to the Anti-Defamation League, in 2021, they found that 41% of Americans reported that they had experienced some kind of online hate or harassment. Members of the LGBTQ plus community actually were found to report one of the highest rates that were kind of recorded, by 64% of them saying they've received hateful comments online. The Jewish community also suffered an increase in hate, and I'm assuming, it has been confirmed actually by now that since October last year, anti-Semitism and also Islamophobia have just increased significantly since the attacks. Also, race-related hate speech and discrimination has increased over recent years, and in context of the COVID-19 pandemic, Asian discrimination and hate speech has also increased noticeably. So I want to look in a bit more detail, of course, at some of the previous work that has been done on hate speech in the context of disability. And unfortunately, there aren't too many studies at the moment, at least that I could find. Online experiences or also offline experiences, but specifically online experiences of disabled people are still understudied, compared to other groups and people. I want to point out a few studies that I think have done some really interesting work. For example, by Hung et al., and I apologize for the pronunciation. In 2022, they conducted interviews with disabled people to find out more about their experiences online. And most participants reported that they routinely received ableist posts, messages, and comments that made them feel patronized and also infantilized. So most of them reported that they regularly received invasive questions, desexualization, or their experiences as disabled people were denied, basically. Also, specifically in the context of social media, in this case, the platform TikTok, in 2019, it was found that TikTok was actually guiding or instructing their content moderators to suppress the content of disabled people, people with facial disfigurement, Down syndrome, and autism. So, I'm going to come back to this, but also a repeated problem that company guidelines do not necessarily support disabled people and sharing their experiences. Yes, so another interesting study, again by Hung et al. From 2024. This time they focused on disabled content creators and interviewing those. And 96% of people that they interviewed shared that they had experienced abuse online. The authors actually came up with a taxonomy of different types of ableist hate and harassment. So in total, they identified 11 different types, which range from anything from slurs and insults to death threats and talks of euthanasia and eugenics-related comments. Something that they also found, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, is intersectional hate. So they found that there is a really strong increase in experiencing hate online if someone is representative of more than one group or community that shares protected characteristics. For example, disabled creators that also identified as queer had a much higher risk of experiencing hate than someone who was disabled as just having this one category. Another interesting study on a Twitter campaign in Spain from 2018, initiated by the disabled community, using the hashtag #MeCripple as a response to the hashtag movement #MeToo. The study found that, again, most of the tweets reported experiences of discrimination, frequent insults, or contempt towards a person just for their disability. And most participants or most users who participated in this campaign commented that they felt like they were treated as second-class citizens, and again, that their personal identity as a disabled person was being denied. Yeah, so I mean, this won't surprise you. There have been several studies from various different fields that have shown so far that experiencing hate speech online can have significant psychological consequences for individuals, such as it can cause people to suffer from depression, repressed anger, a diminished self-concept, and it can impair people's daily experiences and daily ability to work in a work or school setting. It has been shown to cause post-traumatic stress, a heightened state of fear, and it has also been found to cause kind of people to remain silent as a consequence of experiencing online hate. In a Norwegian study from 2019, it was also shown again that people reported that it not only undermined their quality of life, but that it actually impaired them in their daily life, that they didn't feel safe anymore sharing their experiences and sharing their opinions. So, and again, to refer back to the study by Hung et al. From 2024, disabled content creators reported that often, as a kind of way to mitigate these negative experiences online, they decide to reduce their visibility, and that they actually choose to not disclose their experiences anymore. So it's kind of, this leads me to some of the mitigation strategies that have been observed and are discussed repeatedly in the literature in the context of hate speech. So yeah, self-censorship would be one thing that users who are part of the disabled community choose to, for their own safety, choose to censor themselves and remain silent in the future. Of course, on all social media platforms, there is the opportunity to report content. However, it has been known, I think, for a while now that the whole process of content moderation is flawed in several ways. In most cases, the guidelines that are provided by the social media companies, such as X, Meta, Google, and so on, they are not ideal, they are deficient, and they either cause the explicit censoring of disabled experiences or fail to accurately detect toxic or hateful comments targeted at disabled people. So the reporting system is deeply flawed. Hung et al. Describe it as a breakdown, essentially, of the platform's infrastructure. So it's not working well. And then the opportunity of counter speech or responding to harmful content comes in as another option. So this can be either directly in response to a hateful comment, or it can be indirect. This, of course, can always lead to further hate and to an escalation of the situation. It has also, however, been described by a lot of people who have done this actively. It can be quite empowering to either respond to hate that you have received yourself or to stand up for someone else. So either responding, or another option would be to generate independent content, so independent counter spaces or narratives to just further visibility and further communication. So this brings me, I'd have to rush a little bit looking at time. This brings me to, what is counter speech and what are counter narratives? So counter speech is essentially defined as a direct response to hateful or harmful speech. And it seeks to undermine it, and it seeks to kind of take away its power. This was best described by Susan Benish and her colleagues, and they identified 8 different types of strategies, from just correcting misstatements to empathizing with a targeted individual and identifying with them to show support. Just very briefly, quite interesting work has been done on counter-speech strategies, and it has been found that different strategies work differently well for depending on the protected characteristic. For example, members of the LGBTQ plus community have been found to use a lot of humor and an overall positive tone when they use counter speech, whereas others, such as when it comes to nationality and discrimination based on that, showing affiliation and using images has been found to be quite popular. I'm running a little bit out of time. I'm gonna skip to this, counter narratives. So as I said before, counter speech is usually a response to harmful language or to hate speech. Counter narratives have been defined as stories that detail the experiences and perspectives of those who are historically oppressed, excluded, or silenced in educational settings. So here, these kind of stories or narratives are usually created independently and seek to counter dominant narratives and provide more visibility to marginalized groups. So share experiences, make them more visible, and rebuke dominant narratives, for example, surrounding disabilities, such as victimhood, the idea of damaged and broken bodies. Okay, I want to just briefly mention that this project is part of, or this research is part of a larger project with several colleagues in Germany and in France. What I'm presenting today, or what this data set that I've used, is basically just a tiny proportion. So the overall data set spans across a decade. I've analyzed data from January to April 2023, which already has over 2 million tokens. So I want to point out a few things that I was able to observe in the data. So as I mentioned before, hate speech is often intersectional. So a lot of characteristics are attacked simultaneously. The same is true for counter narratives and counter speech. So that is also often intersectional. So disability is seen as just one aspect of an overall very diverse community. So it is just one facet of diversity along with race, gender, sexuality. So it is seen kind of as a holistic approach. It is often occurs in the context of women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, chronic illness, neurodiversity, and mental health. And there is overall a wider call for more social inclusion, to revolutionize education and workspaces, making the point that if we make it more inclusive for disabled people, we will make it more inclusive for everyone, and everyone benefits. I could also observe that there is generally, so far couldn't find any hateful comments in this specific data set, and that a lot of the narratives that are created by the disabled community are based on empathy and kindness, and just calls for more inclusive practices. More diversity, as I already said, and the idea of community building and creating support for each other. So I tried to group together some of the main types and themes that I could observe, one of which was addressing common forms of stigmatization, stereotypes, and judgments that people regularly experience. So I won't have time to read out all of these quotes, unfortunately, but basically we're sharing experiences of, apologies, of daily experiences and struggles with the community and with also members who are not part of the community. Another big component is sharing lived experiences. So whether that's physical challenges, the experiences of shame, grief, and anger, anger at their own body, but maybe also anger at how people are being treated by able people offline and online. And then another big component was themes around inclusion and building community. And as I said before, creating visibility, support, showing support for one another, kind of the idea of us and we as kind of a connected unit. So pointing out we are actually, there's a lot of us, and our disabilities make us unique, and we should celebrate differences instead of discriminating against people based on their uniqueness and their differences. Okay, I can see I'm already a little bit over time. I apologize for that. So just to briefly conclude, I've talked about the fact that there is a lack of studies that explore disabled people's experiences on digital platforms. So I think it's absolutely important that there needs to be more of these studies. However, existing studies show that there is a high level of abuse that people experience. Mitigation strategies exist, but are often deficient and tend to lead to self-censorship. Forms of countering can be empowering and can build community. But I also believe, and it's not just me, that platforms, social media platforms and companies need to do a lot more to amplify counter narratives. Yes, and also we need a lot more large scale studies. So I've just been able to look at a fraction of the data so far, but hopefully in the next years we'll be able to look at this larger data set, and I hope that other researchers will be doing the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you.